Hey guys, so we're going to talk about America after Jackson. So, to some observers, the rise of democracy in the United States raised troubling questions about the new power of the majority to silence minority opinion. As the will of the majority became the rule of the day, everyone outside of mainstream white American opinion, especially Native Americans and blacks, are now vulnerable to the wrath of the majority. So people worried that the rights of those who oppose the will of the majority would not be safe. So mass democracy is shaping the political campaigns like it never has before. The 1840 presidential election marked a significant turning point in the evolving style of American politics. Now, a gentleman who was witnessing these things firsthand, we have Alexis here. He published his observations in Democracy in America. It's in two parts, published in 1835 and 1840. He becomes the first to use the term American exceptionalism. See, his experience led him to believe that democracy was an unstoppable force that would one day overthrow monarchy around the world. Now, in analyzing the democratic revolution in the United States, he wrote that the major benefit of democracy came in the form of equality before the law. But he did say there were negative consequences. For example, there was a new type of tyranny, the tyranny of the majority, which overpowered the will of minorities. Now, he identifies 5 values that are crucial to our success as a constitutional republic. You have liberty, where individuals are free to pursue their own work. Egalitarianism, the equality of opportunity. Individualism, the ability to rise in society. Populism, it's allowing for individuals to voice an opinion. And then laissez-faire, the belief that the government should not interfere with personal economic activities. Now, in 1835, 18 months before the presidential election, the Democrats had nominated Jackson's hand-picked successor, who was Vice President Martin Van Buren, to run for presidency. Now, he does end up winning, and he is president-elect from New York. However, he is left to deal with the financial burden at which Jackson has left him. So Jackson's destruction of the National Bank led to an economical depression following his presidency, to which Martin Van Buren is left to pick up and deal with. On May 10th, 1837, large banks in New York City began running out of gold and silver. They're suddenly refusing to convert customers' paper money into coins, and it creates a panic along the nation. More than a third of the banks go under. This is that panic of 1837, and it mushrooms into the country's worst depression, lasting some 7 years during this time. So it ends up happening that by the fall of 1837, 90% of the nation's factories closed down. 1/3 of the nation's workers are jobless, and those still fortunate enough to be employed have their wages cut by 30 to 50%. At the same time, the price of food and clothing is soaring. So it sends shockwaves to the political system. Many of the farmers who lost their lands move west into Oregon Territory. So we have this beginning of moving from Independence, Missouri, into trying to reach the Pacific Ocean. Now, what we have then is the election of 1840, and because of the financial strain of the Panic of 1837, Martin Van Buren, as he reruns for president, is running against William Henry Harrison. Now, Harrison, strategically, they place him, they run him as a war hero, based on his 1811 military service against the Shawnee chief Tecumseh at the Battle of Tippecanoe. Now, they picked John Tyler as his vice president. It is the campaign slogan of Tippecanoe and Tyler too. Harrison also runs alongside of it a log cabin campaign. He's trying to run himself as a relatable, common man, just as Jackson had done before. Now, it appeals to the common Americans, and it works, okay? A mass campaign with political rallies and party mobilization. They molded Harrison to fit as a candidate, as an ideal candidate to the majority of American voters. So the 1840 win for the Whigs and Harrison is what many consider the first modern U.S. election because of this. So this matters. Now, we have the national bank's last gasp. See, Harrison supported a rechartering of the national bank to help re-strengthen the economic system in the United States. However, Harrison dies early in his administration, and because of that, his vice president then becomes president. Now, John Tyler opposed the bank, and he actually vetoes 2 attempts that were to recharter it. So it ends up falling and failing again. And then finally, what we have here is the Princeton Disaster. Now, what this is that while John Tyler is president, it is the USS Princeton. It's the first steam-powered warship of the United States Navy. And John Tyler, he wanted to host a public reception. He basically wants to show off their new steam-powered warship. So on February 28, 1844, the USS Princeton departs Alexandria, Virginia on a demonstration cruise down the Potomac. It's not just with President Tyler and members of his cabinet. He also has about 400 guests on board. Now, the captain, that's Robert F. Stockham, they decide to fire the larger of her 2 long guns, the Peacemaker, to impress his guests. So the Peacemaker was fired 3 times on the trip downriver and was loaded to fire a 4th to a salute to George Washington as they passed Mount Vernon on the return trip. So the Secretary of War, Secretary of the Navy, Thomas Gilmer, he tells everyone, come and view the final shot of the Peacemaker as we do the salute. So people come back up on the top deck to view this. Unfortunately, as the gun is fired, the gun explodes. It instantly kills 6 people, one of them being the Secretary of the Navy, Gilmer. It also kills the Secretary of State, Abel Upshur, along with 4 other high-ranking federal officials. This still sits as killed more top U.S. government officials in a day than any other tragedy in American history. Now, President John Tyler, who was aboard, was not injured because he was below deck. What ends up happening is that they actually strapped any plans to construct more ships modeled on the Princeton. Because of this, the United States did not develop any more steam-powered warships. Now, really, the most extraordinary political development in the years before the Civil War was the rise of American democracy, right? Whereas the founders envisioned the United States as a republic, not a democracy, they had placed safeguards, such as the Electoral College in the Constitution, to prevent majority rule. Early 1820 saw Americans embracing majority rule and rejecting old forms of deference, right? So you have this new breed of politicians that are emerging, that are learning to harness the magic of the many by appealing to the resentments, fears, and passions of ordinary citizens to win elections. So people like Andrew Jackson are really the politicians who start this. So you have the characteristics of modern American democracy, including the turbulent nature of majority rule, first appeared during this age of Jackson, and he exploits that along with candidates following him.